dry, boring. So my hope is to just really, let's just challenge ourselves. Because this is actually, if you think about it, if you take it away the fancy words, it's a very controversial concept. That Jesus, okay, a man, a human being who came historically, we know existed, died, and then something happened after. What we're going to say he's also God. Okay, so what does it mean when I say that Jesus is divine? What does that mean to you if you had to use other words? Let me put it this way. You guys are Sunday school teachers, okay? You were sitting in front of fourth graders, and you were trying to explain. It's like, what does it mean that Jesus is God? What do you say to them? What does it mean?
I guess you could go with the all-powerful, all-knowing, all that.
Okay.
Right.
So he's got attributes of God. So but teacher, what about Moses? He knew a lot of stuff, and is he God too? Or my teacher, she knows everything. Or mommy knows everything, or whatever. Yeah.
Maybe you could explain some of his miracles.
Okay.
What he was able to do, and then, yeah.
So then what about, but didn't the disciples do miracles too? Like St. Paul healed people, and St. Peter healed people, and St. Mina, you hear all these saints, they do things, they do miracles too. Are they God?
So you could probably talk about his different forms.
Okay.
He takes, I don't know how I'd describe it to a fourth grader, because it's not he's a magician, but
Right.
He's the Holy Spirit, the
Okay.
Father and the Son. So he's the one, I would say probably he can appear in different forms.
Okay. What do you guys think about that? So what makes Jesus God is that he's sort of that he can appear in different forms, someone
Right.
from Harry Potter or something, right?
I don't want to be blasphemous.
No, I'm going to sound a little blasphemous. I'll tell you why. Because I think to understand this and to teach it, we have to think of it from a perspective of a non-believer. And I think a lot of us, we sort of we haven't really challenged our beliefs. And I think it's important to do that. Not because I want you to stop believing. My goal is not to have you leave and think, all right, maybe he's right. Jesus' character is a little bit. No, my goal is so that you can really buy it. Because, we say faith is really important, but also logic is important too. They're not mutually exclusive. I believe, from all of my studies, and I'm hoping to impart on you, I'm hoping you believe this too, that all of this stuff stands up to evidence. It stands up to science, it stands up to proof, it stands up to history, it stands up to archaeology, it stands up to logic. It's not just, yes, there's a leap of faith that is required, but there's also, you can also use your left brain here. That's really important. Because if you're going to be teachers, you want to engage your kids with both sides, the left and the right brain. It's okay. So it can be hard to explain what does it mean that Jesus Christ is God. What does that mean? Well, I think you guys were all on really good starting ground, okay? That God, you want to describe who God is, all of his characteristics, that he's a creator, that he made everything, that he's all-powerful, all-knowing, unconditionally loving us, that he created us, and he's completely man, and God chose to be fully man and fully God at the same time out of his love for us. That's kind of that's what we're implying. How do you know? Before we get into what we're going to talk about why do we believe Jesus is God? Why do you believe Jesus is God? Based on what? Just because Mama and Baba said so, and then Abuna said so, and then your teachers say so, and they all seem like they know what they're talking about, so it's good. Cool. I believe them, I guess, so I'll believe that Jesus is God. Is that good enough? Maybe. That was good enough for me for a long, long time, up
Right.
until college.
I mean, it depends on the phase of life.
Right. So if that's good enough for you, that's fine. But I really want to know where are you coming from, so that you believe, if you do believe. Hi, Bruno.
How are you guys?
How are you?
Saying no
Keep
one
saying
to
that.
say hello.
Hi, saying that. Thank you.
What are you talking about?
Talking about the divinity of Jesus.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Very easy topic.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, you know about the servants meeting?
That's
Servants
next.
Yeah, next February. We moved it to February, but
Oh.
God willing, we'll have the workbooks for you, especially to use for servants prep.
Oh.
So that'll be done. God willing, half of them will be done in February, and then the other
How
half.
do we
by
access them? Obviously.
We will have them hard copy and
Okay.
also like
Electronic?
digital. Yeah.
Awesome.
So
Okay.
we'll get them for you, so you'll be
That
able
would-
to follow.
that would be
And
great.
then we'll have, they're welcome, they have the courses that is coming up in the Saturdays of the Great Land.
Okay.
So, you told them, right?
No.
Okay. So then if you'd like, crash courses, which that's what they're designed for, there's 7 Saturdays of the Great Lent, starting, it's the week before, so it'll start February 11th, going to April 1st, and every Saturday, so it's 7 Saturdays, 7 hours each day, but it's like a crash course, like so for New Testament, Old Testament, patristic,
It's
dogmatics.
at Claremont?
Church
Is this
history.
the one in Claremont?
It's actually at St. Maurice.
Is it St. Maurice?
So for the people who want, we'll have a liturgy like 7 to 9, and then it's 9 to 5
Okay.
with lunch. And then all of those are like the basics. So have the basics, what you'll need to know. And then we have the exam for the servants, which will be in the summer or pre-servant. So if you're anyone starting the service. Yeah, so anyone starting service in August will have had to take the exam this year. But for the existing servants, they have until 2020 to pass
Okay.
the exam. So,
we'll get you the information and
yes, very easy, very good. Just like Divinity of
Right.
Christ. It is the same. So may God be with you.
Thank
I don't want
you.
to interrupt more.
Thank you, sir. No, so grateful.
Will those be archived or?
The lectures?
Yeah.
Yes.
They will.
So because well, this is the first run at it, so we hope that it goes
Okay.
smoothly. But if not, each one of those is a course.
Okay.
So
Wow.
say for example, if you pass 5 out of the 7 sections, then you can either retake those 2 sections, or you can just take like a course if you want a deeper knowledge of it.
So do you have to register, or can you just show up
For the
courses?
those which courses?
The Saturday ones.
The Saturday ones, yes.
Okay.
So that's all on the website.
On the website.
Information website. But if not, we can even do it when you're there. But it's
Okay. That you do
preferable
ahead of
that we
time.
know because to prepare for lunch.
Of course.
You can also do it online.
Okay.
So, but you'll have to also to get the login and stuff so that you can be online. Enjoy.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, really careful about not being heretical. Okay. Okay,
We were talking about.
we're talking
why-
about, this is the question of the hour. Why do you believe, if you believe, I'm making an assumption, if you believe that Jesus is divine, he is God and man, okay? Why do you believe that? Based on what?
This may be the same thing as Mama and Baba told me or whatever, but the fathers wrote it, and
Mhm.
I've had it interpreted to me by very well read, very well educated priests that I know. Abuna Anthony Paul is the best example I can think of.
Yeah.
Particularly pertaining to the questions of the incarnation. Athanasius and Saint Cyril they're the highest authorities that have ever written anything about the incarnation.
Absolutely.
So I don't think it's wrong necessarily at any phase of life to believe it because they said so.
Not at all.
Particularly when they explain it the way that they do.
It's a very good thing, actually. I think in a sense, even if you're going to say, I believe it because the Gospels say so, well, the Gospels are written by other people. They weren't written, it's not Jesus himself that wrote it, right? People that witnessed, that bore witness. So all of what we're believing is really other people that we trust, that make sense to us, sharing their beliefs and the information, and we're kind of taking that for face value. So there's that is what it means to be a part of the church. That is normal. I just want to challenge you guys. Any other reasons? I think that has to be part of it. You have to believe in the people ahead of you because that's how you get the information. Whether it's the fathers or your parents or a priest or servants or whoever it is or all of those combined. But why else?
Well, I think there's something to be said about like his work in your own life. So like the Father saying it is not as personal to me as when I go through something and I feel like his intervention literally pulled me through it, or retrospectively if I really, really wanted something to go a certain way and it didn't go a certain way, or I struggled big time to get through it and wondered the whole time, where's God? But I look back after it's done and I'm like, this worked out so much better, and just perpetually feeling like his interventions are like right there. So I think for me to make it personal, to care, to like not just be like a fountain of facts, like I'm not even good at remembering facts, but my faith is strengthened because of his intervention in my life, and I think
Absolutely.
Can I
yeah.
just, so I completely agree with you in terms of the existence of God.
Mhm.
But if you're talking about personal,
The
intervention,
divine, right, yeah.
you don't really, it's not like you see, God announcing to you that he is 100% man and 100%
Correct.
God, or Christ.
Right.
So that's why, particularly pertaining to the nature of Christ, I think that the fathers and the church are the only source that we have.
I agree with you, and I think that's foundational, but I don't think in the moment when I think about his divinity, I'm thinking, oh yes, because,
All the blessings.
right, St. John Chrysostom, or whomever, to me it becomes like, his divinity to me is like, it's not so much, I believe it's him doing it. I guess maybe to a non-believer, you can't necessarily say, oh, that's God. People will say, that's karma, that's like happen chance, that's like Mother Nature, that's whomever. Obviously, I think the foundation comes from Mama Baba and Abuna, and you know what I mean? Like believing that this thing that you had no control over happened because of God, that didn't come from.
Let me ask you guys kind of like
Nowhere.
a semi-related question. Did Jesus himself ever say, I am God? Or did Jesus ever sort of, do you think that he actually meant to communicate, I am God himself?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't know why. Is this a trick question?
It's not a trick question, but I want to know why you think that is.
Like why he
Direct
chose
quotes.
to do that?
I am. I was before Abraham was. I was. Countless others, but those are the two that spring to mind.
Those are a great place to start. Absolutely. He absolutely did. And I think that people often forget that. They kind of forget that. They focus on, the miracles or his nice teachings and all this stuff, but he also made pretty direct claims. And I just want to, so here's everyone's handout for today. I want you to write your name on it as well, because I keep folders for you guys, those who are new. So take notes, whatever, and if you keep coming, you'll get a handout each time, and we'll have a file for you at the end. So we're going to go through, and I need one of those papers too, if you don't mind. There are countless instances where Jesus actually made the claim in so many words. He never said, hey everybody, my name is Jesus Christ, and I am 100% God and 100% man, and he never did it that way, but he said and did lots of things. One of the things he did that disturbed the Pharisees because it really made the claim that he was God is he forgave sins. Well, at least half the time, probably more, when he healed somebody, he said, your sins are forgiven you. He did that on purpose. Why is that radical? Why does it matter that Jesus, when he was healing people, forgave sins? And what does that have to do with him being God?
Only God can forgive sins.
Why? Why only God can forgive sins?
Because he was the sacrifice.
Kind of. Sacrifice for the sins?
Yeah, like, only...
But why would it be weird if St. Peter or any other saint, when healing, said your sins are forgiven you? Why can only God forgive sins? I don't.
Isn't it because Peter's a sinner? Everyone else is.
Because he's a sinner. So one is that if you're going to forgive sins, you have to be sinless. But why? What is that? Why? What is a sin? Who's a sin against? Is it against Peter? Is it against me? Is it against you? It's against God. So it's like this. If someone slapped Jasmine in the face, if Joe slapped Jasmine in the face, and then someone walks up to Joe and says, or walks up to Jasmine and say, I forgive Joe. It was like, wait, that's not yours to forgive.
Yeah.
I think I'm mixing the analogy. But do you know what I'm saying? Like, you can only forgive something if it's been done against you, okay? So only God can forgive sins, because a sin, the nature of it, is that it is an abomination against God himself. It's like God made us a certain way, and we said, Toz, I don't care, and I'm going to live my own life. And we chose to do something against him. And that's what a sin is. So it's against God, only God can forgive them. Does that make sense? So just the fact that he forgave sins drove the Pharisees insane. He's like, people don't do this. If you're doing that, you're kind of saying you're God, because only God can forgive sins, because, right, it's completely blasphemous. Here are some of the other blasphemous things he said. Let's just go read them through, and then after we read them, we're going to do a little exercise. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh my God, this is like perfect. I couldn't do this any better. Then each of you are going to take I'm going to assign these challenge questions. You guys are going to pair up, and I want you guys to role play. How would you answer that question? And then we'll come together and talk about some of the apologetics. Do you guys know what apologetics is? So for those who don't know, apologetics is kind of like the discipline of using logic and philosophy and any kind of evidence type thing to respond to questions of religion and faith. Okay, so it's what I want to do today. Okay, Dio, would you read the first quote from Luke?
But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the mighty God. Then they all asked, Are you then the Son of God? He answered them, You said it, I am.
Any questions about that? So, like, Jesus didn't deny he was the Son of God, right? I'll just let you know, because this is from the academic world, although I think it's a little silly, people will kind of debate what the Son of God means. From the Christian perspective, from most people's perspective, Son of God pretty much implies you think you're God, right? But there are some like passages in Daniel where there's images of the Son of God, and people will say that that's just kind of like a prophet. So that's something you might hear if you get into the academic side of things. But if you do and you have more questions about it, please ask me. I'm interested in that stuff. Okay, Grace, would you read the second long passage from John?
I and the Father are one. Again, his Jewish opponents picked up stones to stone him, but Jesus said to them, I have shown you many good works from the Father. For which of these do you stone me? We are not stoning you for any good work, they replied, but for blasphemy, because you, a mere man, claim to be God. Jesus answered them, It is not written in your law, I have said you are gods. If he called them gods, to whom the word of God came, and Scripture cannot be set aside, what about the one whom the Father set apart as his very own and sent into the world? Why then do you accuse me of blasphemy because I said I am God's son? Do not believe me unless I do the works of my Father. But if I do them, even though you do not believe me, believe the works, that you may know and understand that the Father is me and I am the Father.
Okay, now, so Jesus' response is a little bit difficult to understand, but the gist of it is that he was saying, you are confused about who I am. You think you don't believe me when I am making claims about being God. Look at my works. Look at what I can do. This is God's work. This is the Father working in me and I in him. So this statement, I and the Father are one, is extremely important to theology. This is a gift that Jesus gave to us by telling us explicitly that him and the Father are one. Why? Because, I'll tell you why, while you guys are writing.
It's because people get confused.
Yes.
They're just like, oh, if Jesus is the Son of God, then how is he God? Or like,
Right.
is Jesus and God one person?
So much throughout history, as we talk more about the early church and the history of our church, so much of the heresy and the splits and one of the reasons why we have so much division in our church is trying to wrap our silly little human minds around this concept of God the Father and God the Son being one. And people trying to make different ways to understand it. Wait a second, they're one at some parts, but not at others. Sometimes he's just pure man. And sometimes, so this is why our church is very, is really clear in the creed and our liturgy that his divinity and his humanity didn't part for a single moment or a twinkling of an eye. That at all times they have always been together. Okay, you can't separate them. Okay, Mariam, would you read the next passage?
If you had known me, you would have known my Father also, and from now on you know him and have seen him. Philip said to him, Lord, show us the Father, and it is sufficient for us. Jesus said to him, have I been with you so long, and yet you have not known me, Philip? He who has seen me has seen the Father. So how can you say, show us the Father? Do you not believe that I am in the Father, and the Father in me? The words that I speak to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does the works. Believe me, and I am in the Father, and the Father in me, or else believe me for the sake of the works themselves.
So this is another instance where Jesus is essentially saying, I and the Father are one. My works are done because of the Father. And this whole time, the disciples are trying to struggle with this. They're trying to say, can you show us God? We want to see, can you show us God? And Jesus is kind of saying, fools, you're looking at him, guys, where have you been? Connect the dots here. So, and that's what, it's a slightly different situation from us and the disciples, but that's what God is doing with us too, where it's we're but I don't get to see him, and, all this, and we're sort of but where is God? It's wake up, he's right here. It's he's right there. So that's kind of what Jesus is trying to say. So glad that he didn't stay. All right, Jasmine, would you read the next passage, please?
Now after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, his brother, led them up on a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with him. Then Peter answered and said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and suddenly a voice came out of the cloud saying, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear him. Matthew 17:1-5.
Awesome. Do you guys know what we call this instance? This is called the Transfiguration, right? So the Transfiguration, I wanted to put this in because where else have you heard, does this phrase where a voice from the heavens says, This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased? Where is that?
Isn't that in Abraham? Oh no, wait, no,
But it happens in Jesus' life.
His baptism.
In his baptism. So it happens in his baptism and at the Transfiguration. And I think that's important that we know that it's happened more than once in Jesus' life. At the very beginning of his ministry and also kind of in the middle of his ministry. The other reason why I wanted to include this passage, and I just want you guys to notice, when you're looking at the different passages, where are they all from? They're from where? The Gospels. Okay, so there's lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff outside of the Gospels. We can talk about some of the Old Testament stuff that connects to the Gospels. We could talk about all the St. Paul's writings have all kinds of stuff that point to the divinity of Jesus. I wanted to talk about the Gospels. Which Gospels? 3 out of the 4. And I could have added something from Mark because it's there. This is really important because one of the big things you'll hear is, wow, a lot of the Gospels don't really talk about the divinity of Christ except for John. John really does, like he goes heavy on the divinity of Christ. Like there's like 5 million quotes from the book of St. John, and there's probably about like 100 in the other ones. But the point being is there is still a lot that points to the divinity of Christ. When Christ himself says, I'm divine, and he does things that only God can do. In Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's all the Gospels, not just John. This is important because when you're talking to people that kind of know a little bit about the Bible, they will separate the first 3 Gospels. They call them the synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke. Okay, and then John is kind of this outlier. So a lot of, like, I took a class in college where the professor, who was Jewish, but he taught a class called The Life of Jesus, was sort of like, John just kind of got all this weird stuff, but all the other Gospels don't really point towards the divinity, so we're just going to take that as the main stuff. But there really is more to it. So I just want you guys to hear that. Any questions before we do our fun little exercise? Okay, so I'm going to have you guys pair up in 2s, okay? So why don't we start you 2? So I'd like to do this, and tell me if you guys are down. I'd like to try it so that one person is the person trying to respond to the question, and the other person is the skeptic, is the atheist, is the non-believer, is the doubter, okay? And that person is kind of trying to challenge that person, poke holes in their argument, and you kind of like role play a little bit. Are you guys willing to do that a little bit? And then we'll come together and see what you guys come up with and how to answer these tough questions. I beg of you to take notes, because when we come together, you guys can jot down what you thought of, what were your arguments, and we can share together, and then I'll take notes together. So you guys answer question 1, which is about how do you respond to the statement that Jesus is kind of like a cool guy, he's like a nice person, like a moral teacher, kind of like a Buddha, but I don't really believe that he's like God himself. And then how do you guys respond to you guys will do number 2, that there's really no evidence that Jesus rose from the dead. Like this whole like resurrection thing sounds a little too weird. I want you guys to answer the question about how do you know that the Gospels are legitimate, because we're basing a lot of our argument on the Gospels, right? Jesus said these things, how do we know they're true? And then how do you guys know that, and then you guys will do number 4. How do you know that Jesus alone matches the identity of the Messiah and of God? Okay, how do you know that only Jesus could be God and it isn't some other person? What it is about Jesus that fits this like identity of being God and the Messiah and all this stuff? Why couldn't it be some other teacher? Okay? Easy questions? All right. Yeah. All right, I'll give you guys 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. So there's no. Oh wait, yeah. Well, no, when you're
You're so hard.
But yeah, put you on it's not possible, yes. I don't decide.
So,
Well, okay, who's who?
All right, you're the skeptic, you're answering the question.
I remember.
So I think he's a great teacher, but like
There was like
who else
a.
do you think fits the role? Okay,
I
so
remember that.
maybe, like,
There was like.
so John he was a very good role model.
Like there was like something.
I don't know, I mean like the moral teacher like necessarily is gonna like do everything correctly, but like
they were there
the things that he taught and the values that he taught.
Yeah.
Are we
So
assuming
like
that
in and finding this,
are we
you
assuming
know,
that
bias,
we know
or
God's
something.
entire lifetime? Like,
Sure.
okay.
Can make assumptions.
John himself, well, I guess John himself said,
Yes, everybody has this guy.
Because of all these accounting.
there was all these confusion, people
And I would think
think
like
I am the one who,
like just from
like,
different people.
Yeah, try
People
to,
who were not
like,
like
towards
who became
um,
believers after certain.
he
like,
himself, John
instances
himself says,
following.
I am, I'm coming
So I don't
before
think that
my God
like
and
if
my
it was
master.
one person
He's
writing it,
someone
then
who's
yeah, it would be biased.
kind of
But
like, so he was
guys are done? He convinced you?
We both like know because we like in
Yeah.
So I guess
classes
that
that have like taught us like
Okay, good. So you know it. Okay, perfect. Give you guys like 2 or 3 more minutes.
Don't want to marry human into that.
Like, how does one that Jesus not just
I know.
God? Like, how do you, like, okay, yeah, the Messiah is.
Yeah, that's probably the easiest of the 4
He's
questions.
not just God.
yeah, the other ones I'm not sure.
Yeah, just stole C.S. Lewis' argument.
I
The
think that,
trifecta argument?
in Genesis,
Good.
God says
I-
that, or
I was
Bible
hoping we
says
could
that
talk
he
about that.
created the land, and then the Word like hovered over it, and then in John, when Christ was born, he said, and the Word became
It's a
flesh.
solid
So
argument.
that means that he had already existed before his
I'm so
birth.
proud of you guys. Well done.
And
I'm proud of you all.
Before John
Yeah.
died.
You ready?
yeah,
Book did
But
you
then-
read?
and also he was
In
he
what
was at
book?
the same time
You
as
tell
God
me.
himself. They were together before he created me. Before he created.
So,
Okay.
in all of them.
In all of them?
Mhm. All the Gospels.
So because
But
it appeared
no,
in
I'm
Genesis
talking about like the actual
Before
that's what it
nature,
was.
anything else was created. They
Right.
were
Like,
all
where is it
together.
documented that he rose
Yes.
from the dead?
Yes.
Okay.
All of them.
No, I'm talking about
That's a
like
good argument.
the crucifixion. Like, you know how it says like events?
Yeah.
Things
All of
like
them go through it.
Mhm.
So like
They,
four,
so what they'll do, so what you'll see is that there'll be certain things that are kind of skipped over in some of them, and some of them have highlights, but there's some events that are pretty much in all of the Gospels, okay? One of those things is the crucifixion, another one of those things is the resurrection. That's in all 4 of the Gospels. Mhm. And then, like, different details will be given. So, like, you know how we say there's 7 sayings of Jesus on the cross? Those 7 sayings are not in all 7 Gospels. There's like 1 here, 2 there, 3 here, you know? So you put them all together and you get 7 sayings, and so on and so forth. So you get different details, but the crucifixion itself happened in all 4 Gospels, and the resurrection happened in all 4 Gospels.
But I have to go for my dad's kids, so
Please
can
do.
go first. Or,
Please do.
so we're gonna go first.
Let's do it. Let's go first.
Okay, so
Okay, yeah. How do you know that Jesus alone matches the identity, or is that identity or identify?
Identity of the Messiah.
And of God.
Sorry.
It's okay. I just realized the typo. I was like, wait. Anyway, yes.
and so I said that in Genesis, it says that God created the earth, and then the Word hovered over it.
Okay.
And so, and then in John, when Jesus was born, it says that the Word became flesh.
Okay.
So that kind of means that like Jesus, like the Holy Spirit and the Word which became flesh, which was Jesus Christ, they existed before any nature, anything else existed. That was my argument.
Very good argument. Okay.
She nailed it.
what was that last part? Existed before what?
Before like nature or like the creation of God.
Wait, what existed?
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Like the Word.
Lord. And I love what you did there, because I think the best way to answer this question when you're talking about identity of the Messiah is a Jewish term, right? So to answer that question well, to say that he's a fulfillment of the Jewish law, you have to take a look at the Jewish law and the prophecies and the scriptures. And then what you do is you match them together. And gosh, I wish we had like 300 hours. We could do that. There's a lot of beautiful things, but that's one beautiful instance of where you can take the New Testament, something in Jesus' life, something from the Old Testament. You can say this matches. There's lots and lots of instances. Concrete things from the way that Jesus was crucified. There's like psalms that kind of, there's a psalm that sort of almost walks you through the way Jesus was crucified as a prophecy to more abstract things about his life, like the virgin birth or things like that. So all kinds of things are sort of hint to this is the Messiah. And then the other aspect we kind of talked about that he's God is that he said and did things that only someone who could claim is God would do, like forgive sins and rise from the dead. Those are only things, and do really supernatural things that only God has the power over nature and time and space and all that stuff to do. Okay, well answered. Thank you for your patience. Justina, please go.
Enjoy guys.
Do you guys have any other thoughts about that question before we move on to
Can you kind of repeat that again? Like, summarize what?
Sure. So there's two kind of pieces to it. There's how does Jesus' identity match with the Messiah, which is kind of like how is he the Jewish Messiah? And that you can do by taking a look at the Old Testament scriptures and to the New Testament and saying Jesus' life and everything about it really just sort of fulfills and matches what the Messiah was supposed to be. Okay. That he was a sacrifice. And really the Jewish people at the time they had a pretty different understanding from what Jesus was. They thought the Messiah was going to be this political leader that was going to come and save them from the Romans and all this stuff. But the Old Testament actually talks about him in a very different way, and Jesus meets that, not the political person, but the Messiah. Yeah.
Okay, so I think it's so interesting how Samson and Delilah, they happened in the
Old Testament?
right? Yeah.
You're right.
So I sat in on this lecture for my ancient Near East and Middle Eastern history class, and it was like on the Temple of Pukot. They found this synagogue in Pukot, which is like from 450 maybe AD or 40 AD. I don't know. I forgot what. But they pictured like the Messiah. It was like they had pictures of Samson all over the temple, and I think they pictured the Messiah as someone who's gonna be like Samson and come in and do that. It was really
absolutely
interesting. Really
they pictured somebody that was gonna sort of that was gonna be a fighter and a warrior for them, and turn over the regime and that kind of thing, and put the Jewish people in power. And that's not what Jesus' focus was. He submitted to the Roman, to Pontius Pilate, to the person that was, the political figurehead, at the time. So he didn't sort of uproot the political system, because he was there to uproot the spiritual system. Okay. Any other questions? This is a good point. Any other questions about that one? You feel like you could answer that if somebody asks you? That one's pretty. What about who wants to go next? I'm so eager. They just have to answer the question. Yeah, let's talk about yours. Okay, so read your question.
I think that Jesus is a great moral teacher, and a lot of the things he said were good and all, but I don't really believe that he's God.
What do you say to that? That's, by the way, super common, right? Have you heard that before? Right? Christianity sounds good, but this Jesus being God thing's a little much.
The so-called Jeffersonian Christians.
Yes. That's what they're called.
So
what do you say to that?
So we just talked about one of the big arguments to that was, okay, if Jesus said we look at all these passages, you said there's a bunch more in John, you said there's a bunch more in all the other Gospels. If he repeated himself saying, I am God, and if you don't believe that he's God, then how is he a moral teacher if he's lying all the time? Mm-hmm. Because somebody that is supposed to be a moral teacher, if they're teaching you good morals, what does that say if they're lying all the time? Then they're obviously not teaching you good morals. You can't be a good moral teacher who lies.
Absolutely. You guys mentioned that this is a very common argument used in C.S. Lewis's writings. You know who C.S. Lewis is? So C.S. Lewis kind of coined this, what's called the trifecta argument, that you either believe that Jesus is Lord, is a liar, or a lunatic. Those are the only three options he gave you. That he either is actually God himself because of the claims he made and what he said and did. He either believes he's Lord himself. He is like a demon, and he's trying to mislead everybody, and he's completely lying because he's making these outrageous claims and they're not true. Or he's a lunatic, he's just completely sick and out of his mind and just doesn't know what he's doing. So there's no room, because of what Jesus said and did, to think that he's just this benign, nice Buddha type person teacher because of the claims he made. You have to pick one. This is really different from other religious leaders. Muhammad never said, I'm God. He never said that. Buddha never said, I'm God. None of the, no other prophet, Mary Baker Eddy, Joseph Smith never made claims that they're God, okay? They will make claims about God. Jesus is the only person, leader of a religion, that made the claim, I am God himself. So we either take that for face value, or we throw it in the trash and we say, he's crazy or a liar. Those are your options. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other things you wanted to add about that? I think you answered.
There's just one thing where she had brought up that that he's just a good moral teacher, and what he says, other than his fault of lying all the time, is great. But if you're just going to take his the Jeffersonian Bible of just his teachings, it's the same as the Old Testament. So what's the point of paying attention to Jesus?
Yeah.
Why not Moses or Leviticus or any of the prophets of the Old Testament?
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. Jesus becomes irrelevant, really. Mm-hmm. All right. Do you guys want to talk about what your thoughts are about number 2? Someone read the question.
There is no evidence that Jesus rose from the dead. That is not possible. And even if he did, what does that prove? So we talked about how no ordinary human can just rise from the dead. It just shows his divinity that he rose from the dead.
Right.
So, and then we also said.
Why? Why does it show? Why is that in particular so important to our understanding of divinity? Just because no. So let me ask it another way. Can any human take this pen and turn it into a radish?
No.
Okay, right. That's not something an average human can do. But would that be enough? If say I was able to do that, would that be enough to say I'm God?
No.
So what is it about this miracle? Because they're both miracles, right? Supernatural things. What is it about being dead and then being alive, rising from the dead, versus turning a pen into a radish? That, what is the difference between those miracles that makes it so that one makes you feel like this is more divine, and the other is sort of he's just a magician or can do supernatural things or a miracle worker or
No
whatever.
one can rise from. It's just once you're dead, you're dead.
We'll be all done.
So because of the finality of death? But once it's a pen, it's always a pen.
I guess
They both follow nature's rules.
I guess I just lost it. It's okay. It'll come back to me.
So, any thoughts about that? I think this is important because when we turn a pen into a radish, we're talking about one non-living object to another non-living object. Okay. When we're talking about dead to life, we're talking about creating life. Okay. So we're going from something that is not alive to something that is. That can only be done by a creator, by God himself. Okay. So that's sort of, it's another step, it's another level. Okay. Now, are there saints who have risen people from the dead? There are. They always do it in the name of God. God is the one doing the work. So God is really the only one who has that authority to give life where there is no life, to create life. So that's why this aspect of rising from the dead points so much more clearly and so much more loudly to the divinity, because that's only a God thing. Okay. Any questions or challenges about that? I want you guys to be doubtful and ask me things, challenge me. I want that, so please. But okay, all right, so let's assume that. How do you know what happened? How do we know he actually rose from the dead?
Yeah, so we were I was trying to remember, so I was watching the History Channel and they found different things that proved that Jesus was buried in the tomb.
Do you remember any of those things that sort of...
I think there was there was something, they used this technology, I think there was something left behind that showed his face on it.
Yeah.
A shroud of Turin.
Yeah.
That's what it's called.
A what?
That's what it's called. It's called the Shroud of Turin.
Yeah, the shroud. Yeah, so I knew it was a piece of material that was left behind. Okay, good. I wasn't sure because I was I think it was a piece of material that was left.
Can you explain what that is for those of you that don't know? Have you guys heard of what the Shroud of Turin is? Okay. So what is it? If you just
I don't know
explain
what
it.
it is.
Okay. Does anyone explain what is the Shroud of Turin? Why is that a piece of evidence that could be used?
That the lady wiped on Jesus'.
That's a different one.
That's a different one. Okay, that's why I wasn't sure.
So there's two. There's two pieces of cloth that are now in museums. Actually, I don't know if they're in museums. I don't know where they are, but they're now somewhere, but there's two pieces of cloth. One is the shroud of Turin, which is the cloth that he was sort of covered in. The idea is when the resurrection happened, there was sort of like there may have been an intense burst of light or something like that sort of left an imprint of his face and body on the shroud. The other is when he was crucified, when he was being, and there was blood on his face, a lady named Veronica, so they call it the like cloth of Veronica, or like something of Veronica, dabbed his face, and there's an imprint of like very old blood of his face. That one doesn't point so much to the resurrection because that happened before. But okay, does that sound what you guys know about that? Anything to add? Yeah.
I mean, I guess to play devil's advocate.
Please do.
I watched, I don't know if it was History Not, it was a couple years back, but they were saying something about like they carbon dated it and like it didn't correspond to like the time that people were talking about, and so there was like a bunch of like skepticism there. So like
someone created it.
Yeah, I feel like, and then like I feel like the Shroud of Turin is a good start, but like you need something else to back that up because there are going to be skeptics that are going to be like, oh well, like I completely just.
So what else could you use to back it up? I agree with you. Shroud of Turin is a good start, but that's not enough because there's skeptics and there is this sort of like carbon dating issue. That is true.
Well, we said the four Gospels when we talked about it.
Yeah.
What about the four Gospels?
That it was mentioned in every single one.
Okay. Why is that important?
Because four different accounts.
Right. So like, and they match. Right.
They're also made by four really different people too.
Right.
Super different people. Absolutely. Okay.
Also the testimony of the guards, who
Good.
at first tried to, I think, blame the apostles for stealing the body, and then they later.
And that's what people still believe now. Like people that want to say it never happened, they'll blame it still on the apostles the disciples stealing the body, because it's historical evidence that a body disappeared. The question is, how did it disappear? But yeah, okay. So the account of the guards. What about all the appearances he made?
That's true.
Right? Well, Jesus in his risen body, after he rose from the dead, before he ascended to heaven how many days later?
40.
40 days later. So he was on his resurrected body, he would appear to lots and lots of people. Women, Mary Magdalene first, right? And then the disciples, people walking on roads. He appeared at a beach. He appeared over and over, different circumstances, different people, different things, to Thomas, right? So there's all of these eyewitness accounts as well.
Those were also documented in the...
They're documented in the Gospels, and there's also documented outside as well. Yeah. Okay, and there's a lot more, but we can get more into that for the sake of time. Let's go into 3. You guys did a great job. Thank you.
So how do you know that what is written in the Gospels are legitimate and that they really represented Jesus accurately and without bias?
What if they just thought he was really awesome and just trying to talk him up?
So,
But that there was witnesses during the time, and then they wrote about him.
Okay.
So there were people that actually found him. They were present during that time.
What witnesses are you talking about?
Like the authors of Matthew and Mark.
Okay, so just the gospel writers were there. Okay.
so they were like present, living, witnessing, watching him day to day.
Also, like the bias part, like if, cause a lot of times there are people that doubted Jesus, and if there was like bias, then the authors would have taken it out of the story, but they left it in there because they didn't have any bias.
Very good point. So the Gospels, if they were really biased, they wouldn't be so darn confusing, right? There's a lot of stuff that has created a lot of division because of how not very clear it was. If they were really trying to portray everything that happened in the most perfect light, they wouldn't have done that. There's also a lot of evidence, in my opinion, that there isn't a lot of bias because of the fact that a lot of the ways the disciples themselves are pictured are not very good, right? Like a lot of instances where they're cowardly. In the Gospel of, I think it's Matthew and in Luke, St. Peter is portrayed as not a great person, right? But he's like basically the ringleader. He's like one of the rocks of the church, right? Why would they do that if there's bias, right? They're just, I think, that sort of points, it's more evidence that they're trying to do their best to paint an objective picture of what they witnessed, the good and the bad, like the confusing and the weird and the more straightforward. They put it all together and said, here it is, deal with it, This is our record. So, yeah, okay. Good answers. Anything else?
And that's basically what we came up with.
Okay, beautiful. You guys all convinced?
Yeah, but that's
Questions,
like
thoughts?
preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good. You're gonna get these questions, whether it's from your Sunday school kids or peers or whatever. And I think it's just important to sort of like practice solidifying what you might say, what you actually believe and think about it, doing more research. And I think there's a lot of places to go. I think probably one of the easiest reads is this book. I read it a long time ago in college. In terms of just like kind of if you're looking more for like evidence and that kind of stuff, this author speaks to a lot of the scholars in each of these fields, answers a lot of these questions and more. If you're interested, this is a classic one. There's also a documentary based on this book, if you're interested. So this is a good place to start. If you want more resources, if you're looking for more like kind of more orthodox, like fathers and stuff like that, we can talk about other options. But this is, as far as kind of an easy read, an easy introduction to apologetics, this is a good place to start. Okay? So, thank you. I know this is a very long lesson, but I wanted to make sure we do it justice. Thank you. I'll collect your papers. We'll stand up and pray, and next week we're going to talk about how to do a visitation, why do we do them, what does it look like.
Thank you, Nina.
Thank you.